So without wasting much of our time, let's begin the conversation. I had to retweak the topic because the earlier topic had to crash. The 15th BRICS summit commenced on Tuesday in Johannesburg, South Africa, with leaders of 5 emerging economies of Brazil, Russia, India, China and Saudi Arabia and South Africa rather, reaffirming their commitment to the emergence of a new multipolar world order built on the principles of friendship, solidarity, and shared interests. Founded on the 16th of June 2009, BRICS countries currently represent over 40% of the world's population, home to 3.5 billion people, and contribute almost 32.1% of global GDP. About 40 countries have indicated interest in joining the bloc, with 23 submitting official applications for membership. BRICS has, however, admitted only 6 countries as new members with a pledge to consider further expansion. The new members to be admitted officially from January the 1st, 2024 include Argentina, Egypt, Iran, Ethiopia, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. This year's summit with the theme BRICS and Africa, Partnership for Mutually Accelerated Growth, Sustainable Development and Inclusive Multilateralism was attended by more than 50 world leaders. Top on the agenda for the summit, which of course ends today or which has ended today, include the following: membership expansion, as mentioned earlier, 6 countries were admitted; common currency and the de-dollarization of global trade. The war in Ukraine was also discussed extensively, and of course, more involvement in global affairs, especially global financial systems. Now, to help us look at the issues around the 15th BRICS Summit, we have invited 3 speakers that are versed in foreign policy and diplomacy to help us analyze the resolutions made and some of the topical issues that came up for discussion during the 15th BRICS Summit. We have joining us Professor Sherif Gali Ibrahim, who is the HOD of Political Science, University of Abuja. Prof, thanks for joining us. And we also have as speaker, Dr. Suleiman Barnabas, who is a senior lecturer, of course, in Base University in Abuja. Then joining us later, because I learned the students are writing exams, so he's going to join us in a bit. We have Dr. Tochukwu Okeke, another senior lecturer from the University of Abuja. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us on Spaces hosted by Nigeria Today. Now, Prof, let me begin with you, sir. What is your immediate assessment of this year's BRICS Summit? What's your general overview, sir? Prof, are you there?
Among the BRICS member states, there has never been a time in which the BRICS members have come together to unite, using one voice, because hitherto we were hearing about disinterest on the side of India, which was not really happy with the expansion of the BRICS. But in this particular year's summit, we can actually understand how India accepted the move to expand the BRICS mechanism. Then apart from this, if you had listened to the speech made by President Xi Jinping, President Silva of Brazil, President Cyril Ramaphosa, Modi of India, all their speeches were actually centered on coming together to advancing technology, artificial intelligence, industrialization. President Modi even went further to add about even space exploration, how the BRICS members could actually come together to do so. But what really captivated me in this year's, BRICS summit was actually the speech of President Xi Jinping, who captured so many salient issues in his speech. And the emphasis made on this particular speech has been Africa, Africa developing countries. This has shown that the BRICS is not really intending to just rival the West, but rather they are trying to cooperate together as members of the South-South Cooperation and Developing Nations to see how each other could be conduced to actually boost industrial production. Those who lack the technical know-how, like African countries, there should be technological sharing, there should be experience sharing, there should be motivation, there should be support in all ramifications, as argued by President Xi Jinping, to making sure that African states also are brought to the limelight. Then apart from this, we can also remember that the issue of expansion has been very salient. Why? Because some people have been moving a motion for Africa to join the the G7, whose members are United Kingdom, United States, Italy, Japan, France, Germany, and Canada. But if you push Africa to join in this particular bandwagon of the G7, it's like what Inyerere once said: if you combine a heavyweight champion and a lightweight champion, it will be disastrous. So for Inyerere, if you are combining the G7 and African states, for African countries to be members of the G7, what will continue is imperial domination, neo-colonial subjugation, as well as perpetual exploitation of the third world nation. What I expected Modi earlier on to actually propose was for BRICS to accommodate more African states. Just like now we have Egypt joining, we have Ethiopia joining. So this is going to boost the population of BRICS, is going to boost the GDP of BRICS, is going to boost the economic status of BRICS members. And if the new currency is actually established, we are going to see more and more formidable BRICS, which by extension can actually challenge any force around the world. Remember, they have been dealing with the concept of African growth, dealing with African growth in this particular year's summit. By dealing with Africa's growth, there is the need for absolute industrialization process, as well as experience sharing in industrialization. The coming of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, this is one major area that BRICS member states can actually venture and invest heavily in industrial processes in Africa. Why? Because Africa is naturally endowed by so many resources: solid minerals, crude oil and gas, agricultural produce. But Africa does not harness all these actually. So that is why the West tap from these particular natural resources, and they process it industrially. They return such produce and product to Africa, and African states and people purchase such a finished product exorbitantly. So there is the in the Africa continental free trade area so that Africa will rediscover itself, because African states are not actually trading among themselves. You can see that Mali is not buying from Djibouti. Djibouti is not buying from on of us rely on natural resources, and all of us have different natural resources. So what we need to do is, based on comparative advantage, what Nigeria has should be able to, should be able to process the natural resources through industrial process so that it can meet up with the demands of Benin, Burkina Faso, Cote d'Ivoire, Mali, Mauritania, Togo, Liberia, and the rest of them, and vice versa. So BRICS members who are industrialized already, looking at Russia, looking at China, looking at India, looking at Brazil, so they own the potentials to actually partner with Africa in boosting African trade, because Africa, or Africa continental free trade area, is going to be the largest market in the world if well maintained and well actually practiced. Then apart from this, the issue of justice. Why? Because if you critically look at the concept of justice, the international system has not been just. The contemporary world order has not been just in all ramifications. Remember the assassination of the Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austro-Hungarian Empire, which triggered the First World War, was an act of injustice. The war itself was not just to humanity. The Paris Peace Conference was not just to Germany. The League of Nations, United States of American Congress was not actually just to other independent states around the world, because it refused to ratify the League, the treaty of the League of Nations, but rather withdrew. Then apart from this, you come to understand that the collapse of the Soviet Union had also paved a way for unilateral domination under the unipolar order of the United States of America. And that is why members of the BRICS are now shifting towards a just international order. And this just international order has been spoken by this particular president and philosophers of the BRICS member state, such as Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. If you go back to Brazil, for example, there used to be a philosopher called Paulo Ferreira, who believed that the concept of justice must be adopted by all nations and states, because a state that is not run under the principles of justice will be termed to be an evil state. So that is why the international system, which does not treat people and nations or even states with justice, that international order will be an evil one. And that is why the quest for a shift in the reformation of the international order by the members of BRICS, and the quest for justice, especially to developing nations, to third world nations, and to the nations in the south or southern hemisphere. Then apart from this, if you go back to Russia, Vladimir Soloviev believed that justice is one major virtue that sustain institutions all over the state as well as all over the world. So if you look at, for example, the United Nations resolutions on Palestine, resolutions have been there, but these particular resolutions have not been able to end the crisis between the Arabs and Israel. If you look at the IMF, for example, what kind of justice the developing nations have from IMF or even the World Bank, apart from perpetual indebtedness? So the BRICS members want more just institutions established, want the global financial institutions, political institutions, economic institutions to be just, especially to developing nations, so that they will rather support the development and growth of these particular developing nations, not to serve, against them or to their own detriment. Then if you go back to India, Mahatma Gandhi believed that justice is not only obtainable in the court of law, but is within the conscience of an individual. And that particular conscience, according to Mahatma Gandhi, even the process for seeking justice should also be just. And that is why he talked about equality among people, and that particular conscience for people to develop in dealing with each other, one another. And if this particular concept of justice is actually adopted, it should serve as a universal justice. It should be enjoyed by everybody around the world, either poor or rich, developed or developing, industrialized or non-industrialized. That has been the argument of Gandhi of India. Then if you come back to China, the concept of justice by Confucius, for example, Confucius believed that justice is obtainable through a fair deal. There has to be fairness, there has to be equality, and there has to be harmony. That if the system, the world order is being fair to the third world nations and has been treating the developing nations equally, then there will have been a kind of a harmonious coexistence among all people around the world. Terrorism wouldn't have been a breaking news every day, in our newspapers, as well as harmonious coexistence among members of the international system who have not shared the same history, who have history of conflict, but the concept of justice will have actually dealt with that. And that is why BRICS in this particular summit, starting from the BRICS Media Forum, BRICS Business Forum, and BRICS Leaders Forum, the concept of justice has been actually pursued. Then President Xi Jinping, for example, he conceptualized three major things. And what are those things? Peace and development, democracy and freedom, as well as equality and justice. And this should be pursued. He said that this is our aspiration, this is our pursuit, common pursuit, and this is our common pursuit. So this is according to President Xi Jinping, while Nelson Mandela believed that the concept of justice cannot be given to all except we educate our people and we also allow our people to learn skills. This is the only way to liberate your people against injustice. So these are all weapons that members of the BRICS can actually fight injustice, liberate themselves against the hitherto colonial domination as well as neo-colonial subjugation through education and learning skills. From which industries can be created and established in the third world nations so that to actually be able to produce and send to the international market for their own continuity and for their own progress. So this is what I actually conceived in the 2023 15 BRICS Summit.
Thank you very much, Prof, for that elaborate view, of the BRICS Summit and how it all played out. Now, Dr. Suleiman, let me come to you. BRICS announced an expansion today, admitting 6 countries into the bloc, as stated earlier. Unfortunately, Nigeria was not part of those admitted, and we are going to look at why Nigeria was not admitted subsequently. Now, let me ask, what is your reaction to the decision of BRICS to admit only 6 members? Dr. Suleiman, sir.
Hello, good evening, and thank you for having me. Well, we were told that about 40 nations, showed interest in becoming members of, I'm sure the name will have to change now, since
definitely
reflected the existing or the hitherto members. Now, I think that there's actually this move towards creating a multipolar world. I mean, the world is not comfortable with the overwhelming influence of the West, particularly, led by the US. The problems happening in Ukraine, between Ukraine and Russia, the implications, for the rest of the world, and particularly Africa, in the context of food security, and all these, things actually happening have, remains agitates, the minds of these world leaders, particularly from the global south. And you will understand that at this moment, Russia is in need of friends. They have retained the support of the BRICS member nations in not honoring the sanctions, that the US and other the Western countries requested them. So to that extent, your at the time of crisis, your friends, become, your friendship, you seek friendship. So to that extent, Russia is in need of that friendship. And of course, if they can get that through, membership of increased, expanded membership of BRICS, and that's something that they would want. Again, China also has its own problems, with the US. We know what is happening, between China and Taiwan. That tension is brooding, and Russia is not happy that the US has continued to relate with Taiwan in a manner that they do not accept. And one way that they would want to also spite the US is to encroach into, the countries that hitherto have been considered as pro-West, which, is happening with the coups that we see happening here and there. And then if you look at Brazil, the economic challenges that they have, even South Africa, the economic challenges that they need to expand their economic reach. And the BRICS platform provides them that, opportunity. And so that's why they are not, they are not resisting the requests by these nations to be part of them. So clearly, it's international politics, world politics that is happening. But again, I see a whole lot of problems with this, because there are inherent contradictions in the political ideologies, or if you like, the positions of most of these nations, including the 5 BRICS nation. Because if you see today, the US military and the Indian military, they engage in joint military exercises because of the inherent tensions between China and one of its BRICS members, India, over the border crisis. If you look at South Africa, of course, South Africa continues to say that they are non-aligned. They are not taking side with any of the crisis of the global powers. You look at Brazil. Brazil, again, that tells you, as soon as there was change of leadership in Brazil, the former president was more or less pro-US. This current one, because of some of the issues happening, political crisis in their own country, you see that they have to, cut bricks, and doing so would require that they need to expand their economic base. And they've seen Africa as a ground that they can actually, get into. Again, the question you said you're going to ask question on that, and we'll come to that, talking about whether or not Nigeria was ignored. I do not think that.
Yes, I was going to ask. I was going to ask that, but I wanted us to really keep that for later,
Okay.
because with with the expansion, let me just have a follow-up question, sir.
Okay.
With the expansion of 6 new members, BRICS now controls 46% of the world population and 37% of global world GDP. Now, briefly, before we go to Prof, what do you think was the criteria used by BRICS in admitting these 6 countries? What was the selection process? Is it by GDP? Is it by population? Is it by political leanings, or what, in your view?
Well, the criteria would definitely be both geopolitical and geoeconomic, to the extent that if you look at, in fact, if you look at one of the, if you go through the history of BRICS, you discover that South Africa was a late entrant. And if you look at one of the arguments that was used against South Africa was that they were not that economically compared to the other. If you come to Africa, for instance, Nigeria, has the largest economy in Africa, and yet Nigeria is not so, desirous, or they are not. We are not a member yet. But their decision to come to South Africa was to have a geopolitical presence in Africa. So to that extent, one of the key criteria is membership on the basis of geopolitical considerations. So you see, going to Saudi Arabia, Iran, and of course, those ones also have economic considerations. And also the two major considerations would be geopolitics and geoeconomic criteria.
Okay, that's good. Prof, let me come to you, sir. I don't know if you have a contrary view in terms of the criteria used in selecting members for BRICS. And let me have a follow-up question to that, sir. Now, how do you think the expansion of BRICS will shape the bloc in becoming the world power?
Thank you very much, Mike. You see, the formation of an alliance primarily depends on the volatility and variability of the members of such an alliance. And that is why prior to the First World War, for example, Germany formed alliances with Austria-Hungary, while Russia formed an alliance with Serbia, while France was having an alliance with Russia, Britain was having an alliance with France, Japan was having an alliance with Britain. So most of the times, states and nations, on the principle of balance of power, weaker states try to ally with stronger states. But sometimes, for example, if you look at the G5, South Africa is a member of the G5. You have Brazil is also a member. India is a member. China is a member. Only among members of the BRICS, only Russia is not a member of the G5. They're looking at G6, for example. All G6 are the most advanced capitalist economies of the world. You look at US, UK, Canada, France, Japan, Germany, for example. Then even the G7 up to G8, with the exception of Russia, due to the annexation of Crimea. So the inclusion of these particular 6 countries, that is Argentina, Ethiopia, Iran, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates. All these particular states, if you critically look at them, they are states that are having influence in one way or the other in all their regions. Iran has a very formidable influence, in its own region. Saudi Arabia has a greater influence, in that particular region. Egypt also, is a strong entity, in Africa. Then you also look at Argentina, for example. If you go back to Latin America, look at the United Arab Emirates. So all these particular countries are influential. Suleiman was right to have made mention of geopolitics, geoeconomy. But one thing we must also look at, the BRICS were actually looking at population, economic viability, okay, institutional strength, as well as influence on the regional affairs or even on the world stage. So, for example, if you have Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, uh, these countries come from different continents. China from Asia, Russia from Eastern Europe, Brazil from Latin America, India also Asia, and South Africa from Africa. So now you have Egypt, you have more inclusion, which is Ethiopia, as Africans being members of BRICS. Then you also now have Arabs, United Arab Emirates, you have Egypt, you also have Saudi Arabia. And these particular entities are most of the formidable entities in the Arab world. Apart from these ones, it's only Qatar, for example, that you may include within the Arab world, to have another power within Arabia or within the Gulf region. So these are some of the factors that constitute an inclusion into the BRICS system. If you look at Nigeria, for example, Nigeria can be a member. If Nigeria becomes a member of the BRICS, that actually adds to the BRICS membership, and that will actually add the population, of the BRICS, as well as more influence to the BRICS. But one thing you should actually consider is that all these particular countries are more industrialized than Nigeria. Nigeria being a monocultural economy, even the oil, we are still staggering. We are still having issue of oil theft, which the quantum of oil we are supposed to be producing, daily, we are not even reaching to that particular quota, which was even given to us by OPEC. Then apart from this, the solid minerals are being locally, harnessed, locally, explored. Apart from that, you look at the general insecurity, corruption, which has also exacerbated insecurity in our own state. The security operatives who are actually entrusted to save people's lives, they are the ones conniving with criminals, killing people in order to have economic gains. This military, who is supposed to protect the nation against external aggression, they are the ones involved in oil theft. The security in Borno State, they are now selling fish. They are into the fishing business. They are into farming, while the local people who originally were the farmers, are no longer there. So a kind of compromise, by the agents of the state. So these are some of the issues. And in terms of industry, we are poor. South Africa is more industrialized than Nigeria. So also Iran, so also Saudi Arabia, all these particular entities mentioned. So there are so many criteria, so many variables to consider. We believe that Nigeria, the so-called largest economy in Africa, which by extension, if you look at it, you don't see the dividend, the evidence of this particular nomenclature. I think, and these particular other countries who have been admitted, they have shown interest to the BRICS, to become members of the BRICS before Nigeria. And there are those who have been admitted now, they had written applications since to be members of BRICS. But later Nigeria fell under the other 40 countries who have shown interest to join BRICS. Nigeria always belongs to the skeptic groups, just like Britain prior to the formation of the European Union. The United Kingdom refused even to ratify the Treaty of Rome, 1955 or so. So it was later, after the second attempt, then Britain joined the European Union and later exited through a process called Brexit. So even the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, Nigeria was very skeptical about it. When other states and nations signed the protocol, Nigeria refused to sign. It was later that it signed. So there are so many areas through which membership could be actually granted, to the BRICS. But I believe in the nearest future, Nigeria should be within the lines of those who will be admitted into this particular BRICS mechanism. Then apart from this, there is...
Sorry for cutting you short. Do you think we should be worried? Do you think Nigeria as a country should be worried for not being considered among the first batch to be admitted? Should we be worried?
No. Nigeria shouldn't be worried. Why? Because it has so many homeworks to do. So Nigeria should focus on its homeworks now, especially salvaging people out of poverty, especially in boosting its educational system, especially in fighting corruption, in fighting banditry, in fighting insecurity. So these are some of the homeworks that Nigeria should actually try to focus on. There is also a high level of crime and poverty in South Africa, but on the other side, you discover that South Africa is doing significantly or relatively better in so many areas. So that is why Nigeria shouldn't actually worry for now, because there are so many things which we need to fix at home. Membership of the BRICS shouldn't be an end on itself, but it should be a means to an end. So that is why Nigeria doesn't have to bother by not being a member of BRICS for now, but it needs to actually aggressively address the issue of industrialization. If we are able to take up, because now we are still living as agrarian society, even the agriculture is not self-sufficient. We have not even commercialized agriculture. We are still living on the basis of subsistence farming. For farmers, even the subsistence farmers are not able to feed themselves, annually. You discover that the farm produce will be able to take care of them probably for 4 or 5 months. All the rest they have been sold in order to deal with other lively challenges. So therefore, we are still agrarian. We only produce primarily without really venturing into industry. In the 21st century, the largest economy in Africa must partner with other members of BRICS, as well as China, for example, which is actually ever ready to help African countries to industrialize. And that is why the China-Chingeria, that is the China and Nigeria process of production, or made in China and Nigeria together, this should be advanced, this should be developed. And such a research platform should continue to be established. This particular people, Nigerians and Chinese, should co-produce together. The industry should be established together, especially in Nigeria, so as to enable Nigeria aggressively industrialize and face the challenges of primary production, as well as inadequate market. Because if Nigeria is able to industrialize, we'll be able to produce glass, we'll be able to produce whatever that can be produced using iron due to our vastness and richness in iron ore. We'll be able to produce plastics. Anything produced with plastics, we'll make use of our rubber to produce it. So a lot of things, that Nigeria can actually do, but we are not doing. We rely on others to actually bring them to us. We are not independent, but rather dependent, on foreigners to actually do this for us. So that particular economic strength, industry, research and development should be at the forefront, should be our priority, not even membership of any other state. But again, I must actually put it to you here. If you look at Shanghai Cooperation Organization, for example, China is a member, India is a member, Iran is a member, Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and those states within Central Asia. You discover that they have more than the population of human or mankind. China is there, India is there, the entire countries within Central Asia. But again, it's not as formidable as the BRICS, if I may, So that is why not only having too many members, but how influential are those members, to BRICS? How could they actually contribute in solving and reshaping the international order? in this particular contemporary international system? How could they contribute militarily? How could they contribute economically? How could they contribute industrially? Then finally, one thing I must mention is that Professor John Meishama of Chicago University was once asked when he made a presentation in China that could China rise peacefully? He argued, no, China cannot rise peacefully. Why? Because the United States of America is gazing at China. There are so many flashpoints that the United States could trigger and cause trouble for China. Taiwan, Hong Kong, Xinjiang province, Tibet, so many flashpoints. So he argued that China cannot rise peacefully, but otherwise it must develop its military industrial complex, but based on the principles of realism, that a state has no option other than to acquire power, industrial power, economic power, military power, diplomatic power, cultural power. And that is why the BRICS, they must also diversify in all ramifications. Why? Because with the formation of the European Union, they also came to have the military wing of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which is claiming to be the most formidable military force around the world. So for you to protect your economic motive, there has to be a strategy to build an army. Because with the formation of the North Atlantic, we had Warsaw Pact, which rivaled the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Although the motive of BRICS is not to challenge the West militarily, but what we are saying, gradually in order to protect the Belt and Road Initiative, to protect the BRICS expansion, to protect the BRICS member state interest in terms of global economy, there has to be a kind of backup, security backup. And that is why if they do not do so, remember the Nord Stream pipes, which were just bombed by the United States of America, which belong to Russia, going to Germany. This is what we are saying. For you to pursue economic objective, definitely there has to be a way, a modus to protect that particular economic interest. And that is why we are saying that.
If I may butt in, please, sir, are you trying to say that BRICS should consider the possibility of having a military wing? Just like the way they have the Development Bank.
When BRICS expand to a greater level, it will have no option other than to develop a military wing. And that is what the Shanghai Cooperation Organization is doing, because it started as a security organization, so as an economic organization. Now it is becoming a security organization to deal with security threat and terrorism in Central Asia and among member states. So if BRICS will actually continue to expand, and it becomes, because Jim O'Neill of Gold Search Institute, he actually argued that by 1950, BRICS will be the largest economy in the world, and it will steer and control the global economy. So if you want to control the global economy, you must have a security backup. Otherwise, those who rival you will create a military tension which you cannot deal with. For example, if Russia hadn't military might, it will have been decimated by the United States of America and the Western world. And that is why economically, Russia is standing on its feet. Militarily, Russia is defending its interests. So there is nothing the BRICS could learn. Russia and Ukrainian crisis should serve as a big lesson for BRICS. There is no way you expand economically and without having a military wing. But this will actually gradually emerge. Why? Because the major interest of BRICS now is to do away with the imperial injustice, with the global domination by the West, as well as the United States of America. The currency hegemony of the US dollar. Apart from that, Western institutions which have been dominating the global political, economic, and even socio-cultural institutions. Let there be a shift. Why? Because economic wisdom are trying to actually quit that particular other kind of a strong institution that will make developing nations and states stand on their feet, stand firmly in order to defend themselves against global economic, political, or military uncertainties. And that is why the BRIC must expand with its model of the research believe that if China and India will actually settle their grudges, will settle their border dispute and disagreement, that will make BRICS rather more formidable, and there will be a creation of a currency that will now replace the US dollar. But if India and China will continue to rival each other, that will be almost a mirage. But we are seeing a more gradual rapprochement. We are seeing a more gradual unification between China and India, because both of them have spoken with one word, in Johannesburg, agreeing to
Now,
expand the.
sorry for butting you, sir. Dr. Sule, let me get to Dr. Suleiman briefly. Doc, talking about rivaling, having rivals or rivaling each other. Some have argued that the admission of Saudi Arabia and Iran into BRICS may cause some kind of friction on the bloc, especially with the fact that Saudi Arabia is a strong ally to the West, to the United States of America as well. Do you see a rivalry brewing in the nearest future, especially between Saudi Arabia, Iran, and of course China, Dr. Suleiman?
Yes, and that's why for me, I do not see the possibility of BRICS and yet to be member states, forming a military alliance is very, very unlikely. Very, very unlikely. You see, the world or even the US, they are not so much opposed to forming economic alliances or alliances that they do not see as posing existential threats, to them. Again, I can tell you that my perspective on this is that the US, I mean, the alliance between the US and Saudi Arabia is far stronger than the alliance between any of the member states and of BRICS and Saudi Arabia. And that's why some people still believe that the BRICS would hardly achieve their aim of trying to form an alternative, even in terms of the finance, coming up with a currency that will defeat the dollar, or even becoming a superpower, a bloc that can challenge the US and its Western allies. So to that extent, like you said, pointed out, it's true that the cement, the strength of that can cement their relationship is not, that bond is not there, because there are so many existential issues between China, for instance, and India. We know the history, we know how it has played out even in recent times, where there had to be even some kind of military confrontations and all. Again, the extent to which some of these countries would trust Russia or even trust themselves, one another, is the currency of trust is very, very weak. And to that extent, it's unlikely that they are going to have their way as they would want to
So
have
do
it.
you foresee a supremacy battle or a power tussle in the nearest future?
Well, there's certainly going to be a power tussle that will be so obvious that will lead to confrontation. Already, we know that there's even a power struggle between them. I mean, if you look at the commentaries, even before this summit that they had, you will discover that Russia I mean, particularly what do you call it now? India and China, they are never going to be on the level that they can actually come together. And in terms of their trade, in terms of their politics or diplomacy, you see that they are not so much, committed to the bond of friendship, to the common vision, that they put on paper. Their actions always contradict some of their commitments to each other on global politics, on
This space was downloaded via spacesdown.com. Visit to download your spaces today.
on economy, on finance. And so why they I mean, it's relatively young. So why they continue to see how they can, tidy up some issues so as to improve on their common and collective vision. What we have today shows that it's a difficult task, coming to forming that kind of block to have their way, the way they would want to have it. I tell you that the US and Saudi Arabia are lifetime friends. Saudi Arabia and Iran, are likely never going to be so comfortable with themselves because of even some, very, very fundamental differences, that only eternity can determine whether they will come on the same page, come together on the same page. So I think that this movement of BRICS, their expansion and all, has a whole lot of economic benefits. And if you are talking about injustice, you are still going to see the same injustice you see, with the West, in terms of relationship within the West and the global South, and particularly Africa. That's what you're going to see also in this BRICS nation. They are not, I mean, in the final analysis, they are all committed to their own survival first and foremost. So the relationship is based on what you can actually get, the advantages you can take, but in terms of military, I do not see it happening. Even NATO, as strong as NATO is, there's a lot of opposition to their expansion, and they've been able to have their way because of the enormous strength that they have at their disposal to bulldoze opposition. I do not think that BRICS have all it takes to withstand the kind of pressure that will be coming, and again, that leads me to the case of Nigeria. That one of the key criteria that they considered for this membership is the actual willingness, of the new members, those who have even applied, who have shown interest to commit to the vision of BRICS. And if you look at Nigeria, if you look at what we are doing in Niger, our own ECOWAS and all, you discover that they do not trust, and that's why I agree with what Professor Sharif, has said about Nigeria. Not, that independence is not there. We are not ready. And you look at the leaders also. If you look at Tinubu, you know that Tinubu is pro-West, pro-America, and you see that America and Britain have, started drawing closer to Tinubu, trying to legitimize his government, because of this issue. So the complicated nature of these international relationships, must actually be looked at before we can actually draw any conclusion as to what, would happen or what is happening in the international stage, particularly within the context of BRICS.
Yeah, thank you very much. Now, Prof, before we go to the common currency debate, do you think BRICS should be careful regarding expansion? At what point should they stop admitting new members?
Just as we earlier discussed, expansion is a kind of indispensable. Why? Because there is no international organization that is rather definitive, so to say, except if it is defined by geography. For example, you say West Africa Economic Community for West Africa, and that count on the number of member states found within West Africa. Southern African Economic Community, for example, SADC, whose membership are South Africa, Lesotho, Zambia, Zimbabwe, Botswana, Swaziland, Angola, Namibia, Zambia, Malawi, Tanzania. Being part of Eastern Africa is only one country that has dual membership belonging to SADC as well as the EAC. So membership of such a nascent mechanism, a nascent bandwagon is actually indispensable. Why? Because you are trying to look at the fastest emerging economies, in the world that will control the global economy from 2030 to 2050, according to Jim O'Neill. So this is one. Then secondly, on the issue of the military wing, BRICS indirectly already have a military wing. Why? Because remember, there is no limit relationship signed between Russia and China. And if China does not actually deploy to Russia to support its war against Ukraine, because China, it has not worsened. If, for example, China will be attacked by the United States of America because of Taiwan, then that will be a third world war. Why? Because Russia and China will belong to the same axis, fighting Ukraine on the other side, and here fighting, China, United States, and its allies, such as Australia, such as Japan, such as South Korea, while on the other side, North Korea will join, and other alliances will actually be formed, and fight will continue. Iran is already supporting Russia, and Iran has just been admitted into BRICS. So if members of BRICS should also have this particular military part, because for you to sustain your economy, there has to be a kind of mutual defense alliance. That is why the Holy Roman Empire expanded militarily, the Assyrian Empire expanded militarily, the Ottoman Empire expanded militarily, even the British Empire expanded militarily. So all empires that had risen to have economic strength, they had their own military wings. All these particular alliances that fought both First and Second World War had their own military wings. So what we are saying here, China seeks a kind of peaceful cooperation, peaceful coexistence, a just world, shared future for humanity. So the issue of militarization of BRICS is not on the table. But what we are saying is that as long as BRICS continue to expand, as long as BRICS continues to dominate the global economy, there will be saboteurs who will emerge to cause chaos either among BRICS members or to directly confront BRICS members. So in that particular period, it's not necessarily that BRICS must form military alliance for now. But if there will be any sabotage against BRICS as an entity, then the entire BRICS members will now develop a military wing in order to respond quickly to protect their own interests. This cannot be actually zeroed out. This cannot be cancelled. Then secondly, on the issue of justice, what China wants is a just world. What China wants is win-win cooperation. What China wants is shared future for humanity. China does not want to see oppression, and that is why China has never been a colonial power. That is why Russia has never been a colonial master. That is why India has never been a colonial power and never wished to be. All these are victims of colonialism. And that is why belonging to the BRICS, they are requiring and requesting for what? For a just world, for a new international order and a new governance of the global security, new development, global development initiative, civilization initiative, security initiative. These are all what President Xi Jinping had advocated between 2021 and now. His advocacy on global development initiative Global Security Initiative and Global Civilization Initiative. That you in the West or in the United States do not see yourself as superior to all other people. No, consider each and every person and each and every civilization a civilization. And we need to respect each other, one another. Then apart from this, we need new global security governance, because the hitherto global security governance has not been just. And that is why, look at the Rohingya people of Myanmar. Look at the plight of Rohingya people. The world has even forsaken them. They still languish in refugee camps. Look at the Palestinians, resolutions upon resolutions. Nothing has been done for the state of Palestine to have a sovereign state. Even South Sudan, of recent, has gotten their independence, and they are there on their own. Apart from this, what happened in Iraq, this kind of invasion, what happened in Afghanistan, so there are so many things. That is why China has not been support of any kind and form of military intervention. China did not support humanitarian intervention in Libya. China did not support the humanitarian intervention even in Yugoslavia. So that is why having a just world order, a just international order, that is what the BRICS members are after. Let the international system be inclusive. Let Africa, other developing nations have a say. Let us be treated equally as humans, not to be segregated against. These are some of the things that the global South, is always fighting. Inclusion, equality, equal treatment, fairness, just for harmonious international order. And the international system contemporarily is against these particular yearnings and caused by developing nations. And that is why the expansion of BRICS is to justify and make the international system a just world, and make the international system shift from the Western-dominated international system, American-dominated international system, to a system that will be more inclusive, that will bring each and every member of the dominated world to also have a say. And that is why President Xi Jinping, in his speeches, he has been advocating for all this, that a flower does not make a spring, while hundreds of flowers make a spring. What does that mean? We can no longer continue to live in a unipolar order, but rather a multilateral order in which each and every independent state has a voice and should be allowed to voice its own yearnings and what it wishes for the international system and how it should be structured. And that is why we are not going to see the same international order, the one under the United States and the one under Chinese influence. And that is why hundreds of years, centuries of our romancing with the West has not actually yielded meaningful development. But decades of relationship with China has yielded positive outcome, and that is why we are seeing infrastructure built up, employment opportunities, investment into our economies, and Africa is now changing. And that is why Africa has discovered a partner, which is China, and that is why Africa is romancing with China and is making a shift away from the hitherto colonial powers who have not paved a meaningful way for Africa and third world development. And that is what the concept of justice means. That is what fairness, equality, and harmony. And this fairness, equality result in harmony. And that is why we have harmonious relationship among or between nations of Africa and China. That is why we have China-Africa cooperation. And that is what President Xi Jinping and Cyril Ramaphosa proposed, that there should be BRICS Africa cooperation. Apart from Forum on China-Africa cooperation, there should be BRICS Africa cooperation. So if we have BRICS Africa cooperation, believe me, Africa is going to change massively and aggressively. And in the nearest future, give Africa 10 years. If there is going to be aggressive relationship between members of BRICS and Africa, Africa will actually maintain a sustainable growth which will pave a way for gradual development.
Thank you very much, Prof. Now let's go to the issue of common currency since we are pressed for time. BRICS leaders have spoken on the need to reduce the dominance of the dollars in global financial systems by developing a common currency or prioritizing trade in their local currencies. Now, Dr. Suleiman, let me come to you briefly. Do you support the creation of a common currency for BRICS?
Well, every country, and in this context now, every group has a right to establish or take a path that they think is necessary for their autonomy and even for their competitiveness in the global context. Just like Professor Sharif, has continued to emphasize, the economic aspect of that is the dominance of the US and its allies in terms of the economy. You can see what is happening to what's it called? You can see what is happening to Russia. Because the whole world, our currencies are benchmarked against the dollars. International trade, takes place, happens through, the dollar. So the quest to de-dollarize, currencies have always been there, particularly by those who think that the dominance of the US is overwhelming and that it gives them some political and economic advantages that they think they need to cut down. So for them, they will see it as something that is good. And of course, I also see it as very important. If Africa or ECOWAS, for instance, were able to achieve that also, I think that it would have been able to reduce our over-dependence on dollar. And remember, it's not about competing with dollars. It's about, one, the ease of doing business. Because if the BRIC countries, one of their major, aspiration is to have a seamless international trade, trade amongst themselves and all, then it will, of course, do them good if they operate by using a common currency, or even as some of them currently do, trading with their own currencies without having to, use the dollars. So in that context, I think is a good idea. I do not think that even if they will be able to compete with the dollar, it's going to take quite some time. Maybe the next 1 or 2 decades, for them to be able to compete with the US dollars. However, it makes international business, international trade easier, and to that extent, I think is desirable.
Although many have argued that instead of thinking of a common currency like the euro, that BRICS should rather emphasize more on trading in their local currencies,
Exactly.
instead of using the dollar as the benchmark. Which do you think is more preferable? Creating a new currency or trading in their local currencies?
You see, one is political and the other is economic. And so having a common currency, that will rival the dollar is more of politics than even the economy. So the other aspect of saying, okay, let's accept our currencies, the currencies of the different member states, without having to say, okay, let's come up with a common. That's desirable, but it could also have some hiccups. Remember, Nigeria even entered a bilateral relationship with China, that we could trade with our currency with them, but it's not been able to succeed as we expected when it was formed, when it was established. So one is economic, the other is political. Economic decisions are not as they have their own place, but again, at times nations make their decisions, they take certain positions, not just because of the economy, but the politics of it. And I think that they are quest to come up with a common currency, which some of the member states are not even favorably disposed to it. Like South Africa is not favorably disposed to that idea. Some of the member states are not also favorably disposed to it. So it's something that I think it will take a whole lot of time. It involves a whole lot of logistics, a whole lot of complications in that decision. So I think it's not something that it will happen so soon.
Now, Prof, let me come to you briefly. We all know how the dollar has affected economies of the world. We know how the exchange rate is also affecting our economy here, leading to massive food inflation, leading to high cost of living, the price of fuel and others. For decades, the dollar has been the global currency of exchange, serves as a template to measure economic growth, to measure monetary policies, to measure inflation rate and per capita income of countries, around the world. Now, Doc, Prof, sir, do you envisage the time when the dollar loses its relevance in global trade? So what's your view in terms of common currency or maybe trading in their local currencies or creating a new currency for BRICS, sir?
Mike, you see, there is nothing permanent in this world. As the saying goes, that it is only change. So it means that the dollar will also change. And that is why all the empires I made mention of earlier, they had risen and decline. Look at the British Empire, the sun never set, mantra. So the British Empire, which reigned for more than 500 years, had collapsed. The Ottoman Empire reigned for years and it has collapsed. Assyrian Empire for years, and had collapsed. It was more of American Empire, which reigned for how long? So therefore, the dollar is used as an instrument for global financial domination. States and nations use it as symbol of, their country's or national reserve, so to say. But the issue of the dollarization, even though in the communique on the 2023 15th BRICS Summit, the issue of specific currency has not been set aside. But what was originally agreed was BRIC members will actually exchange using their own local currencies, which will continue. And later they could be pegged, with dollar. Then apart from this, why the expansion of BRICS will actually strengthen the strength of the dollar and reduce its popularity all over the world is that if you go to Saudi Arabia, for example, you don't need to spend riyal. You could transact using the American dollar anywhere you so wish in the United States, either in the market, in the shop, wherever you go in Saudi Arabia, you spend the dollar. You get the point? Then if you go, for example, to, apart from, if you go to Egypt, the same thing, you can spend the dollar as you wish. If you go to, for example, Argentina, the dollar is also significant. But even as of then, you could not go to Russia and anyhow spend the dollar. I was in South Africa, I went to Mandela House. The ticket for me to buy, we wanted to give the dollar. They said they don't accept dollar. And look at the value of South African currency. You give like 13,000 naira, you'll be giving 300 rand, which is South African currency. So therefore, if, for example, Saudi Arabia will cease to actually see dollar as a medium of exchange, Saudi Arabia, for example, India did trade with the rupee. China internationalizes the renminbi. Russia had already quitted because the SWIFT system is not really favorable. That's a symbol and a weapon or instrument of the global financial domination, which is the dollar. So definitely you are going to see, and look at the quantum of oil Saudi Arabia sells to the world market. And now it is no longer using the dollar, but rather the Saudi riyal. What a huge replacement. Russia is no longer using the dollar. China is no longer using the dollar. India will receive its own, currency. To more than 41% of the global population, not completely, not making use of the dollar, but in terms of business transactions and trade, exchanges in international trade and international economic relations, local currencies are being used. More than 41% of the world's population. What do you think? It is really going to shake the dollar. Then by 2050, the dollar might have been completely or utterly replaced, by another or other currencies. Remember, the BRICS currency is not the second and it's not the only one. The European Union has its own currency. And why not even bullying? Why not worrying? Because if you go to the Eurozone, you spend the euro. In June, I traveled to Austria. I spent the euro. And the euro is far more valuable than the local currencies of the members of the Eurozone. So therefore, if BRICS should actually launch a new currency, it's not a new thing. The Eurozone, spend euro, as their own, currency union. So if BRICS will have also a currency union, which West Africa we are planning to have ECO, which in the entire continent of Africa we are planning Afro, then that is not a problem. For the dollar, everybody should know, the Americans should know that the dollar can never permanent itself within the international financial system.
That's very, very incisive.
Sorry,
Well,
sorry, just a quick one.
okay, go ahead.
At times,
Go ahead, though.
At times, these things are more of aspirations than the reality. Because if you look at the same argument was put forward when they talked about establishing the new development bank. The idea was that it was going to rival IMF and the World Bank. But today, we see that that hasn't happened. So if other countries are planning, there are so many issues involved, just beyond just putting up a currency and then it's going. Even the president of India today, when during the summit, admitted that even if they're able to establish their own currency, BRICS currency. That is, the aim is not even to rival the American or challenge the American dollar, but to make businesses amongst the members easier. So I agree that nations rise and fall, but it's not something that we think will happen so soon. The G7 or G8, they are not also relaxing, they are not sleeping. They are not resting on their earth. They are also putting in place. They are also putting strategies in place to also checkmate this challenge that is coming their way. And I think that it's not as easy as we put it on paper. That's my perspective to that.
Good one. Now, BRICS has vowed to create a new world order and displace the United States of America, G7 and their Western allies as the dominant force in the world, dictating global politics, trade, and investment based on the concept of multilateralism and win-win cooperation. Now, Prof, in rounding up, Prof, are you there, sir?
Yes, I can hear you now.
I don't know if you got my question, sir.
No, please, I did not get your question.
I was saying that BRICS has vowed to create, or apparently BRICS is on the verge of creating a new world order and displacing the United States of America, G7 and their Western allies as the dominant force in the world, dictating global politics, trade and investment based on the concept of multilateralism and win-win cooperation. And now asked, are we seeing the emergence of a new world order?
Hello?
Okay, can you hear me?
Hello, Mike.
Can you hear me? Okay,
Hello?
Dr. Suleiman. Okay, go ahead, Prof.
You said, are we what?
I asked a question. I said
Mm,
that BRICS has vowed to create a new world order, and of course displace America, G7, and their Western allies,
mm,
and become the dominant force in the world,
mm,
dictating global politics, trade, investment, based on the concept of win-win cooperation, and of
mm,
course multilateralism. So,
mm.
are we seeing the emergence of a new world order?
It is actually conspicuous. It is vivid that a new world order is emerging. Let me tell you one thing. Even without Russia, without India, without Brazil, without South Africa, China alone can build a new world order. Why? Because the former American president, Jimmy Carter, said that the rise of China is inevitable. Why? Because it is rather inherent that empires rise and empires fall. And that is come to understand and agree that China is the future. So if China will actually place itself under the BRICS in order to have shared future for humanity, then BRICS is the future. So that is why a new world order is apparent, we like it or not, because if you go to Europe, you've seen what is happening in Canada. To pay a house rent for a month is $2,000. People are leaving Canada in thousands. Apart from this, United States of America is declining, gradually declining. Right from the era of Trump, the United States of America has continued to decline. Then apart from this, you go to Europe, for example, you see the absolute nature of inflation that is eating into the root of European continent today. Then you begin to understand that even though, albeit we know that such inflation is rather becoming universal and global, but it's really hitting Europe absolutely. So you come to understand that the rise of China is not just to rival the West, but is to completely replace the West, in terms of the international system and on the world stage. So with or without India, with or without Russia, these are all instruments and variables that will conduce China to actually steer the international system to build a new world order. The Belt and Road Initiative on its own could be greater than BRICS if China so wishes. Why? Because members of the BRICS, along the West Asia, is only India that is out of reach. Coming down to the Middle East, coming down to Africa, coming down to Europe. So despite the rivalry, America rivalry, to rival China's Belt and Road Initiative, I don't think they will succeed. Why? Because the rise of China is inevitable. Just like what President Xi Jinping once said, that China is more than a pond. China is like a sea, which if you dive into it, you might not actually see one or two things, but rather the sea. So therefore, I'm perceiving the future. Right. So the new international order is actually imminent, is emerging. It has already started. The replacement of the American empire from a decline, the collapse of Western European economies, as well as the emergence of the Eastern tigers, the rise of China, the formation of BRICS, the expansion of BRICS, that actually signal the formation of a new world order.
Thank you very much, Prof. Before I get to you, Dr. Suleiman, we have Mr. John Azul from Daily Trust with us. And although he came in a bit late, but I think he has one or two things to say. Mr. John, you're welcome to Spaces. What are your views, regarding the topic we've discussed extensively We discussed the admission of new members to BRICS. We also discussed, a variety of issues, common currency, and of course, BRICS being the new world order based on a multipolar world system, and of course, win-win cooperation, and solidarity for all nations. What are your views so far on the subject matter, Mr. John?
Um, Thank you very much, Michael, and I can see Professor Sherif and Dr. Suleiman. These are world-class scholars on the issues of international diplomacy and cooperation.
Before you go on, I can also see Dr. Austin Mao on Spaces.
Oh,
Doc,
wonderful! Oh, I just cited him now. That's great. Yes,
so you can go ahead, please.
yes, I want to commend you for this initiative, and I do wish that we'll sustain it, especially as the global order continues to change, so that Nigerians will begin to understand the direction and the dimensions of international geopolitics. Um, I want to express my deep disappointment on the admission of new members on the BRICS, especially as it pertains to Nigeria. I was hoping that Nigeria will make a very big showing, especially with our vice president being in attendance, and with the size of the country, and also as the largest country in terms of GDP, $400 billion. Although per capita we are very, very low. But of course, out of the 28 countries, we gathered now that they've admitted 6. And the disappointment there is that we didn't even make a showing. Not that we ought to have been admitted. I listened to Professor Sherif, what he was saying, the standard of development, where Nigeria ought to be. We are not even there domestically to even begin to aspire to the global role. And I also felt the same disappointment when we pitched for the UN Security Council, when Egypt was even invited as an observer nation. We couldn't also make it. Well, I congratulate the countries that made it into this partnership, and I do hope that they will contribute to charting a new global order of multilateralism and win-win peaceful cooperation in the world. I want to also talk about whether there could be a possibility of military partnership, or a kind of a strong military multilateral platform along the line for BRICS. I don't think so, in my opinion. Most of the countries there, apart from Russia, most of the countries in the BRICS region all focus more on development, on peaceful development. Yes, most of them in the global south, they focus on peaceful development. And apart from, I think Israel, Pakistan, India, of course, South Africa before now had this interest in nuclear power, in nuclear buildup, especially in the period of the Cold War in the 1990s, from the 1940s to 1990s. But of late, there have been a lot of concentration on international economy. And that is why I'm also happy that they mentioned the common currency. They suggested that this could be a possibility. Why is the world likely to focus more on economic growth? Because the rise of the world order, the world economy, have been driven by large-scale increases in international flows of information. And then this has profoundly altered the conditions of any attempt to invest more in security. There is so much that is going on in terms of ICT, in terms of climate change, in terms of transborder terrorism, cyber crimes. So the distraction that is occurring by forces of nature and changing economic activities and international flows of information would not allow so much interest in military buildup as it was in the Cold War era. So we are seeing more of renegotiations of international currency, international trade, World Trade Organization, international relations in terms of what nations can gain in their participation. So that is why you see a lot of leaning towards the east by most African countries. We just learned of the death of the leader of the Wagner Group in Russia, Pirozhin. And you could see that when he came to Africa, he was talking about making Africa more free. So there is this tendency for Africans to embrace the East. China, Russia. Russia is more tending towards military, like I mentioned earlier. But then China tends towards economic prosperity. So I see that the BRICS will continue to accentuate cooperation towards prosperity, towards economic activities. And I do hope that Nigeria will learn one or two things. If you look at the military budgets of these countries, from Egypt, Argentina, Saudi Arabia, UAE, South Africa, they all have huge budgets. Of course, Nigeria has a bigger military budget than South Africa. But then if you look at the GDP per capita, South Africa is far ahead of Nigeria with over $7,000 per capita. So we need to do more in terms of our domestic development to ensure that we lift many more people out of poverty, to ensure that we begin to gain international respect in democracy, human rights, in anti-corruption, like Professor Gali Sherif has said earlier. I don't want to recap what he said, but I think generally, I don't see much focus on military strategic build-up, but that could still happen in a lighter mood. But I think ultimately there will be greater focus on economic development. So these are my thoughts, and I do appreciate you for this time. I yield the mic.
Thank you very much, Mr. John, for that input. Now, Dr. Suleiman, as a way of closing, in all of this, we're talking about a new world order, a multipolar world order. The West is there, America is there, and all of this. How should Africa position itself to benefit from these current realities? Is Africa ready, Dr. Suleiman?
All right, thank you very much. I agree with what Professor John. He spoke like a professor, so allow me to use that. The truth.
It's actually vast in international.
Yes, and that's my view also. I think that the BRICS will provide, what we can say, piecemeal alternatives to economic and maybe diplomatic, issues to the global order led by the US, but not to replace it. I don't see it happening. Maybe we all agree that all empires rise and fall, but again, timing is also important. I don't see it happening anytime soon. So again, for Africa, positioning ourselves, particularly using Nigeria as the focal point here. You see, for us to position ourselves, we must work on our politics and also work on our economy. You see, until the world begins to see us as a serious nation, they will not take us very seriously, because nobody is looking for liabilities. Not the BRIC, not the G8 or the G whatever. They are not looking for liabilities. They are not looking for people that they will be giving grants, perpetually. They are looking for countries that, are industrializing, countries that are taking the right political and economic initiative so as to also, stand strong when there is need to contribute something, on the table. So Africa must not position itself as a continent that just wants to take. What are we bringing to the table? And that's where we must build our economies. Like I said earlier, that some of the criteria that they must have looked into before selecting these new members would be, apart from the geopolitical factor, is economy. So they are looking for countries that have something to, and of course, good enough, Africa has something to offer in the context of raw materials, which all of them are interested in. But the autonomy, is very important, because sovereignty, we must stand our ground. Let's not be the people that the world can easily use, to achieve their own interests. When they want to push us and use us to achieve their goal, that's when they will come and identify with us. So until Africa begins to invest in research, also invest in science, to the extent that we also contribute to the development of the world, not just consumers alone, but we must be productive, must have something that can put us in the position of actually making statements that the world will listen to. And I think that Nigeria stands a very strong chance. We have the population. By projection, by 2030, Nigeria will be probably the third largest country in the world. And that's why we already have market for all the productive activities happening around the world. We have a very large market. So let's leverage on these opportunities, and then, of course, work against corruption until our leaders are seen as people who are truly pro their own people, leaders whose interests, whose policies, are to the extent that the country, the collective, aimed at the collective welfare of the citizenry. That is when they will begin to take us very seriously. With the height of corruption, that is going on in the military, in the politics and all, it will be a drawback for us. But when we get these things right, leadership, when we get the leadership question right, I think that we actually have all it takes to actually contribute to whether it's BRICS or the G7 and all, and then take our own position on issues, global issues.
Thank you very much, Doc. Before I come to Prof, Mr. John, how do you think Africa should position itself in the new emerging world order? Mr. John, sir, are you there?
Okay. Oh, sorry. I just heard you. Please, can you come again?
I said before we come to Prof for his parting words, how do you think Africa should position itself in the new emerging world order?
Yeah, we've started on the right trajectory by being part of the multilateral organizations. What we are complaining now is that there are unequal relations. At least we are there in the United Nations. We are there in the AU, African Union. We have had new partnership for Africa development. We have other sub-regional group, ECOWAS, the East African group, the COMESA, and the rest. And then, of course, we commenced last year the African Continental Free Trade Area. So we are doing our bit in terms of participating in international activities. What had been the issue all along, even right from the 1965 Badon Conference between Africa and Asia, has always been to create a more just and equitable international order. So what we now need to do, having attended these platforms, is to now begin to build our technical capacity. And I think we're also in the right path, because some of these BRIC member states, like Argentina, like China, Russia, these are highly industrialized, technologically driven societies. So if we could continue to deepen cooperation in such a way that our own people can build their capacity, then we'll begin to get to that level where we'll engage that new order. We need to continuously develop education in terms of engaging the nature and science, and then use it to enhance the capacities of our people and lift them economically, and advancement in education. Nobody will drive us away from that table. And it is doable. China have shown that it's doable. Argentina, Chile, they are doing wonderfully well in their regions. So I'm optimistic we could do that. And I hope the leaders will take up that gauntlet and do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. The prof, sir, how do we position ourselves as Africans, or how do Africa position itself in the new emerging world order? Your parting shot, sir.
Well, is to actually showcase the sense of independence, to showcase the spirit of ownership, because the BRICS member states believe that even President Xi Jinping had argued that the future is Africa. Why? Because Africa has all the potentials for development. So the world cannot actually do without Africa. If the world cannot do without Africa, Africa should possess what belongs to Africa. They shouldn't actually dump what they have. They shouldn't allow others to come into their own land and steal what they have. This is one. Then secondly, what Mandela said was that to be just to your people is to give them knowledge, give them education, and give them skills. If we give Africans education, Africa will completely and utterly change. Africa will never be the same as it used to be if African population becomes well educated. Education here, we don't mean just we African population that is actually hinged on science and technology. A population that can produce, a population that can manufacture, having the technical know-how. Then apart from this, what Paulo Freire, a Brazilian philosopher, believed in is that let there be education as liberator, meaning education should serve as a liberator against injustice, against domination. So if Africans will be educated, I'm now synergizing the thought of Mandela as well as the thought of Paulo Freire of Brazil, who both believe that the African population desires education. If this meaningful education is given to Africans, Africa will actually rediscover itself, i.e., by knowing the quantum of resources Africa has, Africa should be able to measure the resources it has on every land. This is one. Africa should be able to explore its potentials, what it has. Africa should be able to independently market what it has to outside Africa. Then on the final note, if Africa becomes skillfully educated, Africa cannot actually reposition itself without industrialization. And this industrialization, Africa can, in partnership with members of the BRICS and other members of the global system that hold the key to industrialization, to actually gradually industrialize, so as Africa to be able to process its natural resources, having that particular modus to actually preserve what is perishable, so that Africa, even within 2, 3, 4 years, it could still market what comes out of its own agricultural farms. This is the way for Africa to actually change, and this is the way for Africa to reposition itself.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof, for that. And it's been an amazing time. I want to sincerely thank all of you for your excellent contributions on the subject matter of the 15th BRICS Summit. I want to sincerely thank Professor Sharif Gali Ibrahim, who is the HOD Political Science of the University of Abuja. Prof, thanks for coming on today's Spaces. I also want to thank Dr. Suleiman Barnabas, who is a senior lecturer of Bayes University. Doc, thank you very much for coming. Of course, Dr. Tochukwu Okeke, another senior lecturer from the University of Abuja, could not join us today due to the fact that he was supervising an exam. He promised joining us subsequently. And of course, Mr. John Azu, thank you very much. Mr. John Azu of Daily Trust Newspapers, thank you very much for coming. And of course, I want to thank my mentor, Dr. Austin Mao, although today is in the listener session. Hopefully, in our subsequent edition, we are going to bring him to the speaker section to speak to us. This space today is our first official edition for Spaces because we are trying to broaden the conversation, on Twitter and other social media platforms. Now, this space will be a continuous one as we continue to provide insights on trending topics, especially as it relates to diplomatic relations. So subsequent weeks, we are going to be hosting spaces and we are going to be inviting resource persons to shed light on some pressing issues. Once again, thank you very much for coming. This is a production of Nigeria Today. Once again, thank you all for attending. Good night.
This space was downloaded via spacesdown.com. Visit to download your spaces today. 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 Download your spaces today.